This is Dave of Live Life Loud, the Decibelic podcast, and you're listening to Pods Like Us with Marv.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and today we are joined by, did you say your surname is Pat Gaughan, did you say, Pat?
He's close enough, yeah. Yeah. Gaughan. Yeah.
Gaughan, okay. And to those of us who are podcasters, he's well known as the incredible Instagram account known as Podcastagram. Hey Pat, thanks for talking with me.
No problem. It's a pleasure to be on. I love your own page and what you do. So thanks a million for having me as a guest here today. It's great.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks. I hope everything's okay with you. So, how were you first introduced to podcast?
Basically, it was about a year ago. It's due to this pandemic. I was basically a full-time bartender. I never really had time to listen to podcasts, so I didn't have much downtime. I was very busy in the bar industry. I was managing a bar. And basically, the pandemic came. I had lots of time in my hands, and I started listening to podcasts and getting into a workout regime, listening to Joe Rogan podcasts. I said, right, this is really cool. And my friends were into them. And I know, like, the last year, the podcasts are really growing throughout the world. And we just got into them. And then, I just, what was frustrating me was when I was on Spotify or Anchor, it was always kind of suggesting podcasts in my genre, which is football or cars. And then I just kind of thought there has to be some platform that just suggests random podcasts, any genre, or any niche. And there wasn't. And that's why I decided to do Podcastagram,
Absolutely. A bit like, I was naive, and when I started this, or was thinking of starting this show, I thought, I'll do something different. I love podcasts, so I'll do a show about podcast. And then when I started it, suddenly realised that I'm not the only one. There's a few of us.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, explain to people what Podcastagram is for anybody that is interested.
Yeah, so Podcastagram is basically a podcast platform. We have suggested daily podcasts, so people can come on. It's multiple niche, multiple genre. We do everything, and basically to provide people with these podcasts is two-sided coin, because we have to get the podcast supplied to us, and that gives them, people that's supplying the podcast to us, gives them an opportunity to get their podcast heard, get listens, and get downloads. So we also do a podcast platform where we are podcast tips and tricks. We help people get heard. We're also bringing out an app at the moment, which is going to be a personalized podcast platform. It's going to have merchandise on it.
Cool.
So you're going to be able to feature your podcast and get your merch listed as well. So we do that. We're also on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. We're going to do a bit more on that as the weeks progress. And we're just a podcast platform where you can feature your podcast with us and get it heard, get listens, get downloads, and make some connections, make some networks. And that's what we do. And it's been very popular. So we're only 5 months old, and we're growing very fast. And it's going great.
That is great. 5 months. So the app then, how's that going?
The app, we're halfway there now. We're just waiting on the Apple license and stuff like that. It's going to be Apple and Android. And we've all the podcasts on it ready to go. So just a few, to decide the primary colors for the app, which is the hardest part. I've chose about 30 already and put them, scrap them again. That's the hardest part, just get things right, because if we're doing something, we want to do it right.
So with the app then, I'm guessing that you'll have links to whatever the show of the day is specifically, and you'll have sections for tips and things like that on the app to be able to look up.
Well, basically what it's going to be is it's going to be a place where people can feature their podcasts on. It's going to be like Anchor or Spotify, but it's going to be a personalized platform, because if you feature your podcast on Anchor or Spotify, you're in the pond of millions of podcasts. But there's only going to be 40 podcasts per month. So it's a very personalized platform. So if you feature your podcast with us on the app, it's guaranteed to be heard. There's only 40 of the podcasts on that. And we also there's also an integrated shop on that, merch shop. So say if someone comes on, listen to your podcast and say, okay, I like it, I'd like to buy one of their t-shirts and support them. They can listen to your podcast and buy your t-shirt all in the one place, which is kind of unheard of. It's a new thing in the podcast world, because we want podcasters to be able to make a bit of money, because it's very hard at the moment for them.
That's great. That's brilliant. So what do you think makes a good podcast?
Oh, there's so many things. I suppose the primary thing is good audio. And I would always say to people, you don't need to spend big money to get good audio. Basically, if no money, you're just starting off, use your mobile phone. But just if you are using a mobile phone, 6 inches away from your mouth and 45-degree angle, and basically if you can't afford a pop filter, a clothes hanger and a pair of tights, it actually works. So people can podcast on a budget. I always say to people, podcast on a budget, and then when you get a bit of a following, then spend money. Because I know a lot of people some people spend $5,000 on setup, and then they realize they haven't the time to podcast, and they just it's up in the attic gathering dust, and that's not what you want to do. So start off on a budget, go small, build up a few episodes, build up a following, and the most important thing is have your social media behind you, because if you don't have social media and Instagram, something like that, to drive traffic to your podcast, you're kind of flogging a dead horse. You need a driving force behind that link to get people into that link and get your podcast heard. So yeah, social media is important. What makes a good podcast? A good host, a good guest, a good script, but a very generous script, just bullet points. But because if you do word for word script, you spend 5 hours writing a script and you read it out word for word. It's the worst thing you can do. Over script, and I've made a lot of videos about this. It's the worst thing to do to kill your podcast, because it doesn't let your personality flow, and you just can be like, it's going to sound robotic, and people won't tune in. Consistency, another one. You have to be consistent. If you bring out a podcast weekly, do that. Don't bring out 3 episodes one week and 1 the next month. That's another big thing. Another thing with audio, interruptions. If you have interruptions in your podcast, it's the biggest turnoff you can get. Phones going off, doors slamming, ambulances on the road, stuff like that. Go into a quiet room. There's no excuse. There's just so many things. Because I sometimes listen to 20 podcasts a day who want to be featured. And actually, my biggest turnoff is these Spotify or Anchor adverts at the start of your show. I'm always saying to people, if you have a big following, use them advertisements, no problem. But if you have like 20 or 30 listens, you're not going to make money off them advertisements, and people keep using them. If I see someone just starting off and they have an Anchor advertisement start, it's the biggest off-put ever. Yeah. And I think it's like 40% of podcasts fail because of them adverts at the start, them generic adverts. So if you are going to do one, get a following first, build up your podcast audience, and then they will sit through that because they know it's a good podcast. But make that advertisement punchy. And if anyone wants to example this, High Flying and Adored podcast, check them out. They have the most punchiest Anchor advertisement start you will ever see, and that's how you do it. So there's so many things.
That's good. We'll pick up on a couple of those things. Number one, that is great advice about the pop shield. I will say that I used to work in a recording studio, and we used to actually use pairs of tights as replacement pop shields.
Yeah.
So that is great advice. And second one, I agree with the one about the scripting and using bullet points instead, because I made that mistake on my first episode. I scripted the questions.
Right.
And you find that you're too bothered about rigidly sticking to those questions, and you're already nervous enough as it is, and to do that is unnatural for somebody who's never done something like that before. So bullet points is easier to follow, because otherwise you're trying to get ready for the next question, the next question, the next question, and you can miss something while you're actually recording the show as well. And one of the best things I think about podcast is the tangents that you can go off on. You can suddenly go into another subject, and they're the really interesting bits sometimes in podcast, is where you go off script, so to speak.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Because then that makes it sound natural, and that's what people are listening to in a podcast as opposed to a professional radio show, shall we say.
Because I know people like that have spent, I know I was talking to one girl, she said, I spent 6 hours writing out word for word. And I said, it's the worst thing you can do, because if you are writing a script, I said to people, write it to be heard, not to be read. And that's my saying regarding scripting. Because if you're writing something down to be read, it's going to be over-scripted, it's going to be robotic, and just it's not going to work, because your personality won't flow, you'll be robotic, and people just, there's no vibe about the podcast. Podcast has to be punchy, it has to catch your attention, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that it depends on what sort of podcast that you're doing. If you're doing a podcast that's like a chat, then yes, that's true. But if you're doing a podcast that's like, say, Dan Snow's history program, or Ben Burrell does a program about Bob Dylan's music, they are in a sense an essay. In a way, so that is a different matter altogether. Where you would script that, so you get the facts over, and so that's a completely different thing altogether.
Yeah, I agree.
So, would you say that podcasts need to have a structure or no structure?
Yeah, it definitely needs some structures, no doubt about that. Because if you go with no structure, you're just gonna be all over the shop. It's just not going to work out. So it definitely does need a structure. But as I said, just don't overscript. Plan it out. Think about what your topic's going to be. And even if you're doing one with a guest on your show, the most important thing is actually research that guest.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of interviews on my IG Lives. I put them on IGTV. And one time I didn't do my background on the guests, and I just fell flat on my face, because if you do research of your guests, that allows you to make up the questions and to know their background, to get into a more in-depth conversation with them.
Absolutely. So how do you actually do your research then? Is it just listening to shows that you're interested in, or how do you go about that?
And finding guests, is it for my thing, is it?
For the Podcastagram, how do you find what to post up, and then what's your own research involve in keeping that site up and going?
Yeah, well, in regards to the features in the podcast, I'm lucky enough to get a lot of DMs organically, and we've never advertised yet, so we get a lot of traffic coming into us, and that allows us to go through the features. When someone DMs me to get featured, I have to sit down, listen to a podcast, and if it's not good enough, I would tell them where they need to improve. I'm going to be honest with them. So we're very lucky with DMs, with the features. We never have to go looking for people. And then in regards to other things, topics, tips, and that, research, and I just I'm always networking with other podcasters. I'm very, very friendly with Daniela from Podbooking, that app. She does a newsletter every Friday. So if someone wants to go onto Podbooking app, you get the newsletter every Friday straight away, and that's good. So tips and tricks. I kind of know them all from experience, and I'm just constantly refreshing my memory and get as much information as I can in there, and then I just use the page then to share the information.
That's great. So do you think show length is an important thing, or do you think, like me, that a good thing about podcasting is that you're free to be able to make the shows the lengths that you want to without the how can you put it? Without the pressure that you would get if you're on a radio show, for instance.
Yeah, 100%. I think both sides. I think from your point of view, saying you can choose whatever length you want is good, but I do think show length is very important because sometimes I've seen podcasts 4 minutes long, and I'm actually not joking.
Yeah.
When I see that, I know like what information or what value will I get out of 4 minutes of a podcast. So that's way too short. Another one, I've seen podcasts go over 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that. 2 hours is way too long. The proven ideal length for a podcast is 22 minutes. So I'd always say between 20 minutes and half an hour is perfect. It just hits the right spot. Too short or too long, I think it puts people off, and they can see the length. Obviously, when they go on Spotify and Anchor, they can see the length of the episode before they go on to that. So I think the mid range is 20 to 30 minutes is about the sweet spot for a podcast.
Yeah, but then you've got shows that go out of that, like the Joe Rogans and the Adam Curry shows. They both go well over that sort of time. They're into like the 3 hours, aren't they?
Yeah. It's just like some people like that. I'm not sure how many personal experience. I wouldn't sit through a 3 hour show myself. But I suppose if you're on a journey, going somewhere would be good. But listen, I know like from research, the sweet spot is 22 minutes is the recommended time limit for a podcast.
So you cover any topics then at all on Podcastagram?
Anything. Landscape, cooking, romance, relationship advice, football, wrestling. We've had it all on the page. Basically, movies, music, we have it all. And basically, that what gets most of our compliments there were multiple genre, multiple niches, and we kind of like to keep things different. And that's why people love the page, because it's so different. If you're kind of a one-trick pony, people get bored very easy, especially on social media. So we try and change it up the whole time. So we even had an Elvis podcast on a few days ago, and that went down very well. So yeah, we're always trying to change things up. And people are surprised sometimes when they message us saying, okay, like the Elvis one, so I have an Elvis podcast, you probably won't feature that. I said, no, we'll feature it. If it's good quality, we'll feature it. If it's bad audio, like we'll stay away from it, because at the end of the day, Podcastagram has an image to keep up to. And if we can't start throwing out crap podcast every 2 days, our following will drop off very quick. So we're going to have to keep it integrity too, and just be very fussy who the podcast we feature on the page. But yeah, multiple niche, we will feature anything. As long as it's good quality, we'll do it.
That's great. So would you say then that reflects your own openness to what subjects that you'll listen to yourself?
Without a doubt, 100%. Because what was crazy was when I first started the page, I started off from zero like everybody else.
Yeah.
And what kind of got me a bit of traction was I was following a landscape page. I just randomly followed it. It was a landscape podcast, and he went live one day. And actually, he brought me on the live, and I interacted with a few people on that, and got me a bit of traction. And then I listened to his landscape podcast. I'd never landscaped my life. I never gardened, nothing like that.
Yep.
And next thing, about 2 weeks later, I'd all pot plants and up. I was growing vegetables. It's crazy what you can do when you just go outside your comfort zone and just listen to different podcasts. It can really inspire you.
Yeah, it's like, this show has opened me up to different areas as well, sort of like in season 1, I was interviewing the chaps from TTM Sports, and I admitted actually on the show that I'm not particularly somebody that follows football or very much sport, to be honest, but I said to them that when I listened to their show, they put it in such a way that it made it interesting to me. So that's the great thing that I found about podcasts myself, is that suddenly I'm getting more interested in subjects that I wasn't interested to such a large degree beforehand.
Yeah, 100%. When people go outside the comfort zone and are willing to listen to different things, especially when you suggest a daily podcast, There could be anything, and they listen to it. So many people have been surprised at some of the podcasts on the page, and even go back to the Elvis one again. People listen to his albums again. They haven't listened to him in years. It's amazing what just a suggested podcast can do for people, and they can even take up new hobbies from it, stuff like that.
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, originally before I started doing my show, was a lot of people have probably noticed, a lot of my listening was based around the Beatles or music and film, but it's just expanded exponentially into areas that I didn't know were podcasts. Even though I've been listening to film podcasts and music podcasts for over 10 years, I didn't realise that there were shows that did storytelling, like The Night's End or shows like that, and other programs as well, like I suppose I would have thought that there'd be history programs, but I'd not looked into them beforehand, and there's all sorts of shows
right
there. It's really fascinating because I've said before, if there's something that you're interested in, almost 100% there will be a show for you to listen to as a podcast.
Yeah, totally agree.
Absolutely. So, what's your opinion on music and samples that are used in shows?
Yeah, I think it's very important because it kind of breaks up the monotony. If someone has even music intros are important, but there's a fine line between a good intro and a bad one, because music length on your intro is absolutely massive. If music goes on too long, it is the biggest off-put. People aren't going to sit around because they're to listen to a podcast, not listen to a music show. So basically, keep it about 10 or 12 seconds, music intro. I've heard music go on for over a minute. I'm like, how long is this going to go on for? It's shocking. And obviously samples, the sound effects, that's really good. And I'm always saying to people too, people go on about intros. An outro is every bit as important as an intro. And outros are people always dismiss them. They don't bother with them. Some of them just say, thanks for listening, and that's it. Such an opportunity to plug your social media and tell people when your next podcast is coming out, so they can look forward to it. Outro, huge. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I need to work on that one myself about the last bit, the plug social media, because I'll plug everybody else and I'll forget to plug myself at the end of the show.
Yeah.
Terrible. And you picked me up on another one there, because my opening theme is about 1 minute and 2 seconds long. So
right, is that just music? Yeah,
that's just the music. Yeah, that opens the show up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just. Just get someone, get a friend of yours, listen to it, and see what they think, or get an outsider to give their opinion on it. Maybe if it's catchy, people might like that, but I just find a lot of people think it's a turn off if it's too long.
Okay, so thank you for that. There you go. I'm getting advice as well.
Yeah, I'm only being as honest as I can for people here, because I like to see people get on. I like to see people do well with podcasts and podcasting, and that's why if someone sends me a bad podcast, I will critique it. I'll try and help them out as much as I can.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that very much. So
yeah, and we also do. I also do a thing called a podcast blueprint. I've done my 76th one today. Basically, what we do is we do podcast mentoring. We do 2-hour Zoom calls where we just basically I tell you advise you how to grow your Instagram, your social media accounts, and also how to polish up your podcast, get monetized, stuff like that. So that's another service we actually provided that I forgot to mention.
Right. Okay. That's brilliant. So, what's your opinion on production of podcasts? Do they need to be really well produced, or is a little relaxed production a good thing?
Yeah. I definitely say relaxed. It's like the scripting thing. Like you can overproduce as well. I say the big thing is when you're producing a podcast, don't forget to edit it at the end. That's where a lot of people go wrong. They say, "Oh, I'll be fine." If there's noise in the background, if there's interference, people don't edit out the podcast. People edit their podcast, and it's like that's the biggest mistake people make, because The whole kind of thing of, oh, it'll be fine. That doesn't kind of go about podcasting. I think I was into one day. I won't say what it was, but one of the podcast hosts got to fit a coffin for like 2 minutes, and he left in the show. I was like, why would you leave yourself coughing for 2 minutes in the show? Like, it's crazy stuff like that. So I think, when you're producing, just don't forget to edit. That's a massive thing. Some great free apps out there that you can do that with, and that's my biggest advice to people when they're producing.
Absolutely. I definitely edit my shows. That's a must, in my opinion. Definitely.
Yeah. So many people don't.
No. In fact, I've seen people who do like a live on Facebook or somewhere podcast before, and I've thought, wow, I'm not even sure that I'd actually have the nerve to do that in a way, because it almost takes away that, comfort of having the ability to edit afterwards. Do you know what I mean? It's a scary thought doing a live in front of everybody show. Yeah.
Yeah. A big bit of advice to people I would say is, regarding lives, is do as many Instagram lives you can. I've built up so much networking from Instagram lives. It's unbelievable. You get guests on. They will promote you. I'll promote them. It's the best way to get your name out there, and go on as many lives as you can, supporting people too. Get into the comments. People see in the comments too, and they're starting to interact with your page. I've done 2 months of IG live interviews there. I've done them every Monday and Wednesday, and I just touch on what you said there. It can be a bit nervy. I remember one of them. I actually didn't post in the end because I said to the person, "Okay, I took my time out to interview you. I'm going to promote your page. Just be in a well-lit room, fairly good Wi-Fi, and that's all I asked." And I went live with this person, and there was lots of people watching. And basically, he was in a dark room, and he was drunk. So I cut that live fairly short. So when you do go live, it can catch you out. So I can see like the comfort of doing it audio only is sometimes a lot better.
Absolutely. So, what advice would you give to people starting a podcast for the first time?
Just do it. That's the big thing. A lot of people kind of shy away from doing it. Say, I'll do it next year. And that time will never come. Just do it. As I said, you don't need the expensive equipment, and you have the best app ever that's out there now that does everything for you. The Anchor app. I mean, I can't say how good it is apart from pushing you to advertise. That's a bit. I've talked about that before, but the Anchor app. People know how lucky they are to have this. It's a free app. It shares your podcast onto Apple, Google Play, everywhere. It is the best tool podcasting's ever had. It is unbelievable, and it's free. So there's no excuse not to podcast now. All you need is your mobile phone and a pop filter. That is all you need, and then you can build up as you go along. So my advice would be is just get a quiet room, and if you even have a little box room, egg cartons for soundproofing, they actually work. And just good audio, good guests. Don't overscript, and just have fun, really.
Absolutely. So, what other podcasts do you listen to yourself then, Pat?
I give so many recommendations, but I don't give too many because I feature a lot of people. If I leave people out, it's kind of not fair, But the big podcast, then like Joe Rogan, I love his shows. Every time I'm doing a workout, I've Joe on, and his stuff is brilliant. And then personally, I like a few little podcasts that's doing around at the moment. The Ladies Lair podcast, absolutely brilliant. Life Unplugged, that's a great podcast. Midlife Craven, another great one. The Bub and Gub Show, that's fun. I could name 100.
Yeah, me too. So could I.
Mm.
So, where can people find you and get in touch with you then, Pat?
So basically, to get in touch, DM us on Instagram. It's Podcastagram _ The email connection is on that as well as podcastagram@gmail.com. We're also on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter as Podcastagram. And don't ever be afraid to contact us, even for advice. I'm always there to help. I help anybody as much as I can. I want to see people do well. I want to keep seeing the podcast community grow. And one of the biggest tips ever is to say to people, engage as much as you can, get into that podcast community, make as many friends as you can, and just engage with people's posts, like their photos, DM them, make as many friends in the podcast community as you can, because it'll pay off in the future. They will support you. And that's at the end of the day, that's how you get listens and downloads. And that's how you get your Instagram and your social media flying and your podcast.
Thanks for talking with me today, Pat. Thanks. This has been great.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
You can find Pods Like Us on Instagram, on Facebook, and there is a website which is themarvzone.org. And if you go on there and look, you'll find a link for my post about the show Pods Like Us, and you can contact me through there or through any of those that I mentioned. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.
Hear me, yeah?
I can hear you now. Yep.
2 seconds. Hear me okay, yeah?
Yep, I can hear you. Right, let's...
2 seconds, back in 2 seconds, yeah?
Okay.
Okay, good to go.
That's good. How do I pronounce your surname, Pat? Is it Gaughan?
Gaughan. Gaughan.
Gaughan. Okay.
Yeah. Where are you from yourself?
I'm from just about 20 miles out of Nottingham.
Oh, cool. Brilliant. Yeah. I grew up in Northampton for 12 years. So.
That's good to know. That's good.
Yeah.
So you're busy?
Yeah. I've been very busy the last few months. I took a few days off now because I think it's very important to refresh yourself, reboot yourself every now and again. These last few months have been crazy busy. It's just kind of took off more than we thought it would be. And I'm developing an app at the moment for Podcastagram, and that's taking up so much time. So I'm just taking a break for a few days. I've been swamped the last few months. I'm taking a few days out, relaxing, and I'm going to go back harder than ever. I'm going to go crazy working when I go back. So.
Yep, and I'm crazy listening. Obviously,
yeah. Yeah. So how's your own page going and things?
How's
your own podcast going?
Steady, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not taking advantage of any of these people that keep sending me messages like you've seen them all. You must have done, where it says, "Oh, contact us if you want more listeners," and this, that, and the other. I'm not going for all that.
Them spammy messages. Yeah, them spammy messages. I have a filter on my inbox now. When they come in, I don't even accept them. It's just it's so annoying. And basically, there's a thing too that they've actually taken over people's comments too. So basically, if you use the hashtags, the millions like podcast or podcaster, they hop on people's page and they're promoted here, promoted there, and they're really starting to spam people and annoy people. So I'm always telling people, don't put the hashtags in the millions, because them leeches, I call them, are going to hop on your page and just absolutely spam the life out of it.
All right, so don't do the hashtags. That's what's doing it. Because I'm only doing that so that people can find the post easier. That's why I was doing that.
Yeah, like obviously do your hashtags, have your hashtag strategy, which is very important when you grow an Instagram page. But just don't use the hashtags in the millions, which is don't use hashtag podcast, hashtag podcaster, the big, massive, broad ones, because that's where then people are coming from. They're coming off the big hashtags and coming in and commenting. If you use lower hashtags, you will never see them people because they haven't a clue where you are. So that's what's bringing them in.
Right. Okay. Yeah, like yourself, I thought, I'll take a break from putting episodes out, but I'm still recording them ready and still doing all the listening, and then I've taken to writing about the podcast shows as well that I listen to and doing like a blog about them, which it takes up time as well.
Great.
It's very time consuming.
It does, yeah.
All this.
That's the number one reason podcasters come out this game. Time consuming. I know a few people now they've started recording all their episodes for a whole season. They're recording all their episodes for a month in the space of 3 days. And when you have all your episodes done in 3 days, it gives you great scope to edit them as time passes and when you have a bit of free time. And that's what most people are doing now. Instead of putting themselves under pressure to do it one every week and recording every week, they're recording it all in space for a week. In the next 3 weeks, then they have left out to edit and just promote their show, which I think is a great idea.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. We ought to get on and officially do the introduction to the show then, shall we? If you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In fact, I'll get you to introduce yourself in a second. I'm still learning after over 40 episodes, Pat.
Every day is a school day. That's the saying there.
It is. But it's great when I've got a good guest who can actually give me really good advice to do these things and to learn more.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm even learning myself every day. I'm not an expert. I've kind of been lucky enough to pick a lot of stuff up from different people. And I just it's just school day for me every day as well. I'm learning as I go along.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because the podcasting world has just ballooned during lockdown for everybody. It's just there's so many of them, like especially celebrity shows, and it's amazing how much is out there.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything yet. Podcasting has grown 13% year on year. There could be 15% next year, and year on year, that is incredible. And I reckon in the next 3 years, podcasting is going to take over everything. You see podcast radio coming out. So basically, your radio stations will be taking over with podcasts. It's going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
You've seen it a lot more on TV now. Podcast advertisements. It's going to take over. There's audio's come massive because Facebook is bringing out a feature now soon as well. A little audio feature that's going to be massive for podcasting too. I don't know too much about it at the moment. I'm just that's the little underground rumor at the moment. So
yeah, I mean it's interesting that you mentioned the radio stations playing podcasts because early on in season 2, I don't know if you noticed, but I chatted with Jerry Edwards, who owns the company Podcast Radio, and they are actually a radio station that's all made up of podcast shows.
Yeah,
which is fascinating. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah. It's like podcasting is going to just go. It's going to explode in the next 3 years, and that's why I think people have to make the best of it now and just get their podcast out there and just have a good polished podcast. And as I said, if you have good content, good quality, there's no reason you won't do well.
Absolutely. Anyway, going off subject slightly, Pat, how's it over there in Ireland then with the coronavirus and everything?
It was hard the last 2 years. Basically, we're starting to see a small ease of restrictions now. But we were in the strictest lockdown in Europe there, going back to last month. Basically, you couldn't travel 5 kilometers from your house, so you get 100 euro fine. So basically, your house was your prison. All you could do is get groceries, and that's it. But the restrictions are easing slightly now, and there's light in the tunnel, and I just can't wait to get things back to normal. I just hope that people won't stop listening to podcasts now when the restrictions ease, because I know people were stuck in the house and they turn to podcasts. I just hope that won't ease now when things go back to normal.
I don't know. I think I get the impression that some people have probably got used to them that much that they will now be listening to them all the time. But like you said, some people might, now that they're going out, they might not listen to them so much. Like you said, I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that these people will carry on listening to them.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, Pat, that was a great chat. I mean, I normally do longer shows, and now, yeah. I think this is a decent conversation that we've had.
No, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, hope it wasn't too short.
Meat. No, I think it's good. I think it's nice to put some shorter shows in, and I'm trying to mix it up lately because in the first season it was all about chatting to podcasters, and then this season, this season just now, season 2, I included an episode where I chatted with a friend of mine who's just a listener, and the idea of that was to get the listener's point of view. And so I'm trying to mix it up now, and like getting yourself involved now, it's looking at a different angle from it.
Yeah.
Of the podcast world. So it's just about trying to mix up the idea and see where I can go with it, really, to make it more fun and make it interesting.
Yeah, like that's an awesome idea you had there. Interviewing someone that listens to podcasts, like that's actually genius, to be honest. That's such a good idea. And I have a good few people that I could recommend for you to have on the show. I know lots of interested people that would love to be on the show with you, because I really enjoyed it. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
That's great. If you can pass their information on to me, and I'll get in touch with them, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
And I always have a thing of where when I talk to podcasters, I always make sure that I've listened to a good few episodes of their show first, because first of all, it's a sign of respect that I will check them out first, and then also I've got that bit of knowledge then about what they do, so that I'm not going in blind with just a set of bullet points, not knowing what's going to be discussed. I like to know what I'm talking about first. Yeah,
100% agree with you. Like, it is showing someone a bit of respect, because it's nothing worse than interviewing, you know nothing about someone, and even if you can bring something up this mid-episode, there was a few weeks ago, that really surprises people, and then they know that you have researched them, you have listened to a podcast, and it gives them a bit of pride, as they say.
Absolutely. And also another thing that I do is I mine are that sort of length, because, or the longer length, mid-length I call them, because I'll almost integrate their show into mine, so that in a way it's introducing people to what their show is about by almost doing a mini version of their show. So if I'm talking to a Beatles related podcast, we'll talk about the Beatles, or we'll talk about, when hopefully I get a Queen podcast, I'll talk about Queen or whoever it is, because that way it's introducing people to what their show is about and where their knowledge is as well.
Yeah, 100%. I actually interviewed a fella on IGTV, My Classic Album, Mike Norris. He's absolutely brilliant. His podcast is flying it. He's really interviewed some big guests, and I music wise, he's brilliant. And then there's two other lads in Canada. They have a movie podcast called Good Times Bad Movies. The quality of their podcast is mind blowing. You really check that out. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I have actually listened to a couple of their episodes already, and they are really, really good. They are
awesome,
up there. I think one of the difficulties, though, for a lot of these shows is the rights issues, shall we say?
Oh yes,
because I think that holds people back a bit, because I know a couple of people who I've talked to who've said, "Oh, I won't listen to podcasts because it's just people talking," and I'll think, well, it is, but then there's rights issues to go into. If we start using, copyrighted music or clips from films or from television shows, you're on shaky ground in a sense, and it's not easy to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's actually no way around it.
No.
Copyright is copyright, and I was actually doing a live one day, and I wanted to put music on it. I'd done a bit of research. I'm the kind of person, when I research something, I go into a wormhole for a few hours and I get to over-research things. But there's no way around it. I know some people play music on IG Lives, and IG kicks them off then, and they think it's okay to do that. But that's going to harm your reputation with Instagram. Then, if they keep flagging your stuff, they keep removing you. You're going to get shadow banned, stuff like that. There's no way around it.
Absolutely. It's a shame that there's not a way that somebody can come out with where we can just pay into this fund or something to be able to, almost like the PRS that we have in the UK or whatever, and be able to use these things on shows. It's a shame there's not something there that we can just do that with.
Yeah. Well, that's your entrepreneur side now. You could set up that business. It would actually work. It's just something like that. Something like that.
I was saying, I don't know how shows like Soda Jerker and these other shows that play music, I don't know how they are able to do that without getting flagged.
Yeah, they could have the permission. If you're big enough, you can use the music because obviously with this listener, like you can get permission to play that music from people's managers or companies like that. I know you can do that if your show is big enough. But the smaller shows, I'm not sure how they're doing it. Maybe they're using it and that they haven't been flagged, hasn't been seen. They're probably just on the tightrope and just hoping they won't get found out. Yeah. Yeah, it can happen so easy. Basically, a few years ago, I had a watch business. It was running from an Instagram page. I had 7,000 followers. I was drop shipping from China. That's where I made my few pound I have. And basically, it was going really well. I actually designed my own watch, got it made, and got it produced. It was unbelievable. The business was flying. I was thinking about quitting my job and all that. And then I made one silly mistake. I was rushing for a flight going to Scotland one time, and I needed to get a post up that day. And I rushed my post, and I forgot to credit Hublot Watches. And basically, they somehow seen my post, and my page got taken down. That was the end of my business. My drop shipping was gone, my Instagram was gone, and the business was gone overnight. So, it's a, when you roll the dice like that, it can go horribly wrong.
You really can. Anyway, Pat, I'll let you get on now. Thanks for that, mate. You take care.
Okay, thanks a million.
Stay safe, mate.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.